The NFC sure got a little more interesting after the Philadelphia Eagles take an L to the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football. It's the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans? It's the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday. That means you got me, Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings here with Lauren Cox, who does Locked On Bears, talking about NFC Playoff Picture, and both playoff pictures, honestly. Just how crazy prevalent backup QBs have been this year and how successful backup QBs have been this year, as well as our yike and like of the week. First things first, however, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Lauren, today we witnessed the Seattle Seahawks pull off a home upset with a backup quarterback, Drew Lock, beating the Philadelphia Eagles, formerly feared juggernaut in a huge slump right now. And the whole NFC has now contracted. You have 3 7-7 teams in the wild card position in the Vikings, the Rams, and the Seahawks. You have the Eagles and Cowboys vying for the NFC East title, maybe the 1 seed, maybe the 5 seed for those teams, the 49ers up there. It is getting pretty interesting. It's kind of a 9-team race for 7 spots now, I think.
And somehow you've got the 10-4 Philadelphia Eagles on a 3-game losing streak as part of that spiraling. And all
Man, that really snuck up on you.
It sure does. And I don't know, we've kind of been talking about all year about how no one's really sure exactly who's any good anymore. But it felt like we kind of at least thought the Eagles were still up in that conversation. But, okay, you lose once to the 49ers. Okay, not at the end of the road. They're probably the better team than they are. Then a really tough one against the Cowboys last week. And then now kind of I don't know if you call it an embarrassing end against the Seahawks or not, when it's Drew Lock going out there and all of a sudden, do they come off of the road as one of those, I guess we're not sure how good they actually are teams. And are we left with the 49ers being the only actually good team? Because the Cowboys got embarrassed by the Bills too. The NFC minus the 49ers just bad? Is it 49ers in the Super Bowl for sure and everyone else is just kind of competing for second place?
The 49ers seem like they're about to run away with that 1 seed. They've got sole possession of it right now at 11-3. And yeah, like you said, they're hot and everybody else is cold. This happens to teams sometimes. I'm reminded of the 2021 Rams, who had a 4-game losing streak in the middle of November. They just had this nightmare month. And then they went back to the drawing board and they figured out a couple of things that they were doing wrong and they corrected some things and they moved on and they got hot by the playoffs. So that's the challenge that faces the Cowboys and the Eagles and everybody else that's kind of losing into the playoffs right now, is, okay, what's going on here? What's wrong with what we are doing? How are teams really getting us this bad? And if the issue is that they only have 3 games left to figure it out. They're both going to make the playoffs. They both, I believe, have clinched the playoffs.
Yes.
So they're in there somewhere. And now they have to figure themselves out in time to maybe take the division. But if not, just not be a total mess by the time you have to go maybe on the road if you're the Eagles to a playoff game.
It always feels like, when we get to the playoffs, it's the team that kind of finished the regular season hot that can kind of start, their playoff run almost starts a few games before the playoffs and they can kind of ride that momentum into the first round. And I wonder at what point we reach the, if you're hot, if you hadn't started heating up now, you're not going to have enough time to heat up for the playoffs. Because I think...
Right, you can't go in on a 1-game streak and call yourself hot. Yeah.
I think 3 games is enough, right? Any of these teams that's spiraling right now, if they win their last 3 games of the regular season and turn it around kind of like you were just talking about, that's enough for me to feel they're heating up. But 2 might not even be enough, especially if they're not too convincing, really figured everything out kind of wins, but maybe it's 2 kind of stumble into a victory because, they're a good team playing against bad opponents. It feels like we're coming up on put up or shut up, figure it out for the playoffs, or else you're going to be on major upset alert in maybe as early as the wild card round. Because it feels
for sure
any of these 7-7 teams, in the right day, you can catch the Philadelphia Eagles on a Jalen Hurts is sick kind of day, and even Drew Lock can beat him. So you feel like if I'm the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield just had a perfect passer rating, like, oh, I feel like I could beat the Eagles. I feel like I could beat the Cowboys. These teams all look beatable other than the 49ers, but they'll have that nice first round bye, so no one have to deal with them at first.
And I think about the Rams and the Lions. There's a lot of talk right now. The Rams sitting in the 7 seed, the Lions sitting in the 3 seed, not that far away, right? Tied with the Vikings, who are currently in the 6 seed and would play the Lions if the playoffs started today. Not that far away from taking that 6 seed, or maybe the Lions go up 1 or something like that, from having that wild card Matthew Stafford like grudge match. The Seahawks, if they get Geno Smith back, right, they look very resilient, right? There's a lot of stuff that can happen. There's a tradition, however, we have here on Tuesdays on the Locked On NFL podcast, which is pouring one out for the teams that we think are dead. We try to get to these teams as early as possible to make the takes spicy enough. Here's who we have gotten so far. We have poured out the Carolina Panthers, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals, New England Patriots, New York Giants, New York Jets, Indianapolis Colts, Tennessee Titans, Washington Commanders. I think we did the Los Angeles Chargers. If not, we should. We just forgot to. We should have done that weeks ago. I'm pretty sure we did, though. And I have 3 more teams that are worth considering. Some of these have survived our pour outs before, but Lauren, I will let you make the call. How do you feel about pouring one out for the Atlanta Falcons, losing in the least watched NFL game in history in Carolina, their second win of the year, falling to 6-8, just a game out of first in the division, but it still feels kind of hard.
I counted 11 teams that we've poured one out for. So we're only like 5 teams left that are going to miss the playoffs because 4 will be in. And Atlanta's tough because they just lost perhaps as bad of a loss as you could possibly have. And they lost to the clearly worst team in the NFL. Like the team that played against the Panthers on Sunday do not belong in the playoffs. And they're on a 2-game losing streak, losing to the Buccaneers before that. But like at the same time, they're a game out of first place in their division and a game out of the playoffs as a result. And they've got Colts, Bears, and Saints, which are not easy games by any means, but the Falcons are such an enigma. They beat the Saints just a couple of weeks ago, and yet the Saints look like, a clear step ahead of them just this week. And to me, I would certainly bet on the Falcons missing the playoffs at this point because the Buccaneers are playing well, and I think the Saints are playing a lot better. So, but it feels hard to truly pour one out when they're only literally a game away. But it was such a bad game. I don't know.
It's interesting because they have, I think, they split the series with the Buccaneers and they beat the Saints. So if they do end up in a tiebreaker, they'll have head-to-head on the Saints if that's the way that ends up. I'm kind of ready to do it. Desmond Ridder is on Sirius, and I think they'd have to win out on that stretch, and I don't think they win out on that stretch. How about the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'm also very ready to do it with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got Mason Rudolph. They got the Ravens, Bengals, and Seahawks left on their schedule.
Yeah, anytime you reach we're benching Mitch Trubisky level of quarterbacking, that's the ultimate, hey, we're pouring one out here. Like the rest of
you would know.
I know a thing or two about benching Mitch Trubisky, and that's when you're down bad. And the Steelers
down bad.
As good as their defense is and all that, they're down bad right now. And I can only hope it makes Mike Tomlin available this offseason for a certain Chicago football team.
Oh, that sounds good. Elsewhere in the AFC, even worse record, Las Vegas Raiders. At 6-8, they were 5-8 after their shutout loss to the Vikings. Probably should have poured them out then. But if you just look at the wild card standings in the AFC, you probably already have lost too many games. I think we're a little late to that one. We might have already poured them out I forgot, but yeah.
Did you not see them put up 63 points this last week? They're a juggernaut. They're on fire right now. No, they're
that was what needed to happen for the Chargers. That's doing their fellow Los Angeles team. I said what I said. A favor.
They are on the road against the Chiefs next week on Monday Night Football. That'll be interesting to see because Kansas City needs a bounce back, and the Raiders are feeling pretty good about themselves. So maybe that's a nice little measuring stick for Kansas City. Like, how bad are things going in Kansas City? What happens against the Raiders?
Right. How spicy can things get with the Raiders? How about this? Let's pour out Pittsburgh and Vegas, and we'll leave Atlanta on the table, and I'm sure Ross will relish doing it next week. We'll give him one more chance.
Yeah, let Ross do that next week. It'll be fun for him.
So there's 2 backup QBs in Atlanta right now. There's a lot of backup QBs playing in the NFL here. Both of our teams, Vikings and Bears, have had backup QBs at some point. Mine still does. It's kind of the year of the backup. And I think we owe it to them to take a little moment to enjoy the backup QBs that have had success here in the NFL. So we are going to get into that next.
This episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events, whether it's music concerts, comedy shows, theater events, or of course, all of your favorite live sports. Gametime is going to have the best prices for you with last-minute killer deals, and you can see your view right from your seat on your ticket before you buy it. I always take a look at Bears games with I host Locked On Bears, and right now, if you want to go to a cheap football game, we saw that last week the Panthers game was super cheap, and Cardinals at Bears this week is also going to be super cheap. You can get tickets into Soldier Field for literally $55 on the Gametime app right now. You can find tickets for whatever your local team is across the sporting landscape. They've got it at Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. Download Gametime and create an account. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Thank you, everybody, for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 all sports YouTube feed. It is everything from the Locked On Network circulating all the time. It's like our very own sports TV network, first of its kind. Go be a part of history and check that out. Speaking of history, this has to be a historic amount of backup quarterbacks, right? We've had like 50 plus quarterbacks start a game in the NFL this year. Absolutely unheard of, with injuries, and sometimes it's benchings. Lauren, I know you have a lot to say on this topic, so I'll flip it to you. What do you think of the year of the backup quarterback?
Yeah, if it's not a record for the number of quarterbacks who started, it definitely feels like a record for like the amount of success teams have had without their backup quarterbacks. Often, necessity, if 2 teams are both playing with backups, one of the backups
Right.
got to win. But like particularly this week in general, we saw just on Monday Night Football, Drew Lock, game-winning comeback drive in the fourth quarter, big touchdown to Jackson Smith and Jigba was a beautiful throw. Like it wasn't like Drew Lock was lights out all game, but did enough to help them win the game. I watched Joe Flacco put together a game-winning fourth quarter comeback drive against the Chicago Bears, and it wasn't like Joe Flacco was great all game. He threw a pick 6 and 2 other interceptions, but like down the stretch at the end, does enough when they need to. And Case Keenum was able to do the same thing. Like Joe Flacco was on the street like 3 weeks ago. This was a quarterback who's just sitting out there available to come into a team and start to play well and potentially take that team to the playoff. And the Seahawks, I mean, Geno Smith will be back, but playoff teams are winning games with backup quarterbacks. And I can't help but feel like the value of backup quarterback is increasing, and you can have a guy that you feel like actually can make a difference as opposed to a guy who's just a token coach on the sideline who holds the clipboard. But B, like, does that lower the value of your starter when a backup like Joe Flacco can come in and win your games? Like if your starter's not Patrick Mahomes, if your starter's not Lamar Jackson, maybe even, Joe Burrow, but we see Jake Browning come in for the Bengals and have a really good game. So how valuable are your starting quarterbacks if you have a really good supporting cast around them, good receivers, good running game, good O-line, good defense? Like a lot of other quarterbacks seem to be able to at least win some games right now. And if I'm a team that's on the fence about paying a quarterback that maybe isn't elite, I feel like value seems to be like build around the quarterback spot, because a lot of different guys are seemingly been able to do that this season without being the high-paid starter.
Yeah, how about the Seattle Seahawks? Drew Lock coming in and leading the Seahawks to an ugly win over the Eagles. It wasn't a pretty game, 20-17 at the end. There's a lot of unforced errors and mistakes early in the game. But that is the value of the backup quarterback, right? It's not very common to get the guy that pops in and you think, actually, we can make a season with this guy, right? Oh my goodness, our quarterback went out. You don't get the Gardner Minshew takes the Colts to the playoffs kind of thing very often. It's more the Drew Lock. Geno Smith's out for a couple of weeks. He's got a thing. You know, he'll be back by the playoffs, but we need someone to just tide us over and limp us through, make this team reasonable, and hope we can steal one we're not supposed to win. And that's exactly what the Seahawks did. They stole one that they were not supposed to win, big underdogs going into this game against the Eagles, and took a huge win for their playoff chances when they don't have any right to. They don't have the quarterback. You realize, oh, Geno Smith's out for 2 weeks. Shoot. Well, 2 more losses. What does that do for our playoff chances? A guy that makes it so that's not an assumption. So you don't just start circling those games as losses. That's the value of a backup quarterback. I've said for a long time that you should treat your backup quarterback like a starting position when it comes to what you spend on that guy, like a low-end starting position. You should, I think it's okay if your running back makes about as much as your backup quarterback. Insurance is important. And even if you paid a bunch to your backup quarterback and then you didn't have to go in, you didn't waste that money, right? And same way you didn't waste your money if you spent it on car insurance but didn't get it into an accident. That's an important thing. Plus, backup quarterbacks do a lot throughout the week in terms of helping the team prepare, and they do have an outsized impact on the team. It's just not directly measurable through on-field contributions if they don't actually go in. And if they do, then yeah, forget about it.
And much like starting quarterbacks, it still feels like the teams still aren't good at evaluating backup quarterbacks, right? Because it's 4th string quarterback Joe Flacco, who they plan to go to PJ Walker and DTR before they finally ended up getting to Joe Flacco. And certainly with Drew Lock, there wasn't a lot of confidence that he was going to be a guy to step in and do these games. And even like Jake Browning in Cincinnati, right? Early in the season when Joe Burrow was hurt and they brought in Trevor Siemian and they were bringing in some different quarterbacks around there. It hasn't always been the obviously high paid, best available free agent backup is the guy that can come in and be the difference maker for them. It's just it feels to me a little bit more like it's still kind of a crapshoot of figuring out what's actually good in a backup quarterback and how to utilize that quarterback skill set properly. And also more broadly, a lot more matters the situation around him on that team than the actual quarterback themselves, in terms of the teams that we're seeing successful with backup quarterbacks are the ones that have been supporting their starting quarterback pretty well too. And teams like the Vikings and the Giants and the Jets that have had to go to backup quarterbacks that maybe weren't necessarily all the way there in the first place. Well, the backup quarterback's not just a magical solution to that situation either.
Yeah. Well, so the Vikings situation has been really interesting to this, because I think we've had some interesting case studies where they had, when Josh Dobbs came in after Kirk Cousins got hurt in Lambeau, they didn't have Justin Jefferson. They were banged up all over the place. And they've actually gotten a little bit healthier lately. And Nick Mullins had a pretty good game against Cincinnati. Threw a couple of really dumb picks, but ended up with 300 yards. The offense was functional, right? So you could say, well, Nick Mullins had a little bit more. I mean, he had Jefferson the whole time and Dobbs had to do it without and all that. But Josh Dobbs gave me a really clear picture of when you have a backup come in, those first 2 games can be really volatile in a good way. You expect the backup to come in and just suck. But remember, you're going up against a team that didn't get to scout him. And for Dobbs, when he came into that game in the middle of the first quarter against Atlanta had not prepared for him at all. So when he ran around and did a lot of improvisational stuff, they didn't have a plan for that. They weren't ready to they didn't think they were going to see that, right? Jaron Hall's a much more in-structure player. So they didn't think they were going to see that. And it was sort of like the old, a chess grandmaster versus an amateur is harder than versus an intermediate player, because an amateur, doesn't know what they're going to do. So you can't predict their moves. And I think that kind of thing can happen with these sort of insane runs of backups starting out really like the Ryan Fitzpatrick of it all, Fitzpatrick coming in 4 games of craziness and then someone gets some tape on him and he falls apart. That's the true test. And I think it's been 3 games for Browning, right? That tells me, okay, you're going to have a career. You get a career as a backup now. You've proven that you can function, right? Are they going to win every game? No, but you can function. Give me 3 games. If you're still heating up by your 3rd game, then you're a real backup in this league. And we are seeing exactly the impact that it can have if you have a real backup on your team versus if you're benching Mitch Trubisky for Mason Rudolph.
And I think that sample size is really important when I think back to backup quarterbacks who flashed for a game or 2 and then another team bought in and said, oh, we saw 2 games of Matt Flynn and we got to give him a big contract.
Right.
Let's see Jake Browning, like you said, he's won 3 games in a row now. Oh, that tells me a little bit more of
There's something more real to that. Yeah.
As opposed to if Drew Lock hit free agency after this big win over the Eagles and someone said, oh, he beat the Eagles. Let's go make him our guy. Well,
right.
let's see a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe chill out. Somebody else who needs to chill out is the Tennessee Titans, and maybe less chilling out for the Carolina Panthers. Some teams hitting all-time lows. That is going into our Yike and Like of the week coming up.
The Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I'm on LinkedIn. Luke is on LinkedIn. You listening to this are probably on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all on LinkedIn, because it's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals that makes it the best place to hire. But LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, and you might not have the time to really focus in on hiring. But LinkedIn makes the process intuitive, quick, and easy. They even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions to make the process easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Moving on with this Tuesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast here with Lauren Cox. My name is Luke Braun. It's time for our Yike and Like of the week. We do this every week here on the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm going to kick it off because my Yike and Like come from the same thing. I'll get this done, get out of the way, and you can tell me yours, Lauren. The Tennessee Titans made a big deal this offseason about their new Oiler throwbacks, which look absolutely fantastic. I love the Oiler throwbacks. And I absolutely love that they decided to schedule an Oiler throwback game against the Houston Texans. What a great kick of dirt into the face of a division rival. And I think those AFC South rivalries need to get a little spicier. They're a little bit too, they're too dead because too many of those teams have been bad for too long. So I love that. But man, you got to win the game. You can't lose the game. You got to win that game, man. That's a big yike for me. And on the flip side, a like goes to the Tennessee Titans Twitter account for posting the Tennessee Titans logo with the T edited to be an L with oil dropping down it. That's got to feel good for Houston. Be like, you're going to throw the Oilers thing in our face? Get out of here. You're going to lose to Case Keenum today.
It's a great yike and a great like, and yet it also feels to me like a game that 80% of the country paid zero attention to and doesn't even really know what you're talking about. You know, like
man, then they're missing out because the Texans are real. I really do believe that the Texans are going to find a way into the playoffs, and they're going to pull a stupid upset on someone, especially if CJ Stroud can get healthy in time.
But are people?
You can't lose to Case Keenum when you do that, man. It's so cool.
I love the Texans. Are people watching Texans Titans? Are they tuning in for Texans Titans? Unless you're in, the Houston or Tennessee or generally like the South area. Like I just feel like
man,
we like that whole division, but those two teams especially we associate just like that. That's normally a Thursday night game that we're not watching. But I'm glad for the Titans in this one, or the Texans, and being able to come back in that. But like, okay, the Titans are kind of a crap team, and then the Texans are now injured without CJ Stroud. No one really cares when CJ Stroud's not in there. So, who's really watching anyway, but yet they missed out on a great story.
Such a great rivalry story. I will say CJ Stroud is must-see TV. You have to watch CJ Stroud. Oh, yeah. If you're not watching CJ Stroud because it's just the Texans, you're late to the party.
And Dell was fun too, and that coaching staff is fun. Like the Texans are a fun team. You're right.
I'm rooting for them.
How about another rivalry game for my yike of the week? We touched on it a little bit earlier, but that Panthers stadium was bad. Tickets for that game were like $1. You could get it. You go to that game for like $5 a person. Legitimately, like tickets for $5 in the upper section. They showed scenes of the stands, like even 20 minutes before kickoff. There's like it looks like you could see 100 people in there, maybe just seas of empty seats. And of course, despite no fans in the stadium, which felt like a COVID game again, the Panthers somehow win. Like it's a big yikes for the Panthers as an organization being that embarrassing that their fans won't even show up. But it feels like then an even bigger yikes that despite all of that, the Falcons still found a way to lose to them while still having, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London going vastly underutilized. I mean, it's just the rare yikes all around from both teams. It's at least your game had a yike and a like in. This one is really both yikes in their own way.
Yikes. Man, the Falcons have suffered some indignities this year. Like, I remember thinking this about the Raiders last year because they like lost to Jeff Saturday, and I think they were like the first win for the last winless team or something like that. I'm struggling to remember. This year's the Falcons. They had the Josh Dobbs thing. That is an embarrassing day to lose to a quarterback that showed up 4 days ago. Like, you can't. Oh, that happened to the Raiders last year. Exact thing with Baker Mayfield instead of Josh Dobbs. Like, that's a rough thing, and then to lose to a 1-12 team whose fans don't even want to watch them anymore. And like, this is what bugs me about them, about the Panthers. This is anybody who wants their team to tank. I feel like I talk about this like every week. Anybody who wants their team to tank, look at what the Panthers had in the stands, and you better say, I'm okay with that. You better beg your team owners to be all right with that. If they're all right with that and they want to tank, like, they got to make their peace with being so uninteresting and uncompelling that even your own diehard fans want to do something else with their Sundays. You have ceased to exist, Carolina Panthers. Get serious, or there are 31 teams in the NFL.
That's the thing. It's like, even last year when the Bears were 3-14, like week 18, their last game against the Vikings was not well attended by any means, but it wasn't that bad. And we're only in week 15 for the, there's three.
No, you were eliminated in everything. Like, there was no reason to watch that game.
No.
At least there was a little bit of hype around, like, I get to watch Justin Fields and maybe he's the guy, right? He's going to play and that'll be fun. But like,
shouldn't there be for Bryce Young? I mean, there isn't. It doesn't feel like there is, but like, I mean, he's a rookie.
You'd think
the rookie number 1 overall pick. You should get, you don't bail on your rookie quarterback that fast. I mean, geez, you got to have like delusional faith for at least 2 seasons.
He hasn't been exciting, and that offense hasn't been exciting. It might not be his fault. And if we want to analyze Bryce Young, we have to be a lot less lazy than that. But in terms of, are fans excited to see him? Why would they be? What has he done? Fields had fun highlights. You'd be like, well, at least maybe it's a show, right?
I guess interim head coach Chris Tabor is just not really doing it for us, huh? Not bringing up the juice as much on the Panthers. So that former
Chicago need a big overhaul.
Teams coordinator Chris Tabor, I should say. So he knows his way around some losing football. That's for sure. A good guy to finish the tank. We'll wrap up quick with the like of the week for me. It's going to be a partially petty like, but then also I think there's a certain genuineness to it too. How about Baker Mayfield's perfect passer rating? The first quarterback in the history of Lambeau Field to go in, an opposing quarterback to go to Lambeau Field and have a perfect passer rating. First of all, like, I'm always going to enjoy that happening in Green Bay, but more broadly for Baker, like, I think just Baker's season as a whole can be a like for me, encapsulated by this game. Like, he's on pace to hit 4,000 yards for the first time in his career. I believe he's on pace for a career high in touchdowns. Like, Baker is cooking, and it's fun to watch, and I'm happy for him. Like, he kind of like Geno Smith in terms of that redemption story, right? Where it's like, we're seeing quarterbacks get a second chance later on and in a better situation, or just maybe after some maturation or growing as a quarterback as well, but also getting in a better situation and thriving in a way that, like, good for Baker Mayfield. Like, and it's good for like quarterbacks to not just be kind of one and done where you flame out on your rookie contract, then you're destined to be a crappy backup the rest of your career. Well, no, maybe you keep working at it, you get into a better situation, and you find yourself on your way to a potential playoff team, and certainly setting a first-time record at Lambeau Field. I'll give it to Baker for that one.
Who's the best quarterback in the NFC South? Is it Baker?
I think so. I mean, right now, as of today,
right now, he's playing the best right now, right? I mean, it's nobody on the Falcons. It's not Bryce Young. Is it Derek Carr? But he's had these. I mean, Carr's coming off a big win. They took it pretty hard to, who was it? Randers, or am I thinking of somebody else? No, that was the Rams.
And find it quick. Saints beat the Giants.
Giants, of course, yeah. Irrelevant NFC East teams, yeah.
The best NFC South quarterback is Justin Fields next year.
Okay, let's get out of here before you get in any more trouble. Thank you all for listening to the Locked On NFL podcast. Here with Lauren Cox. I am Luke Braun. Tomorrow you get Tony and James. They will break down everything that is going on in the league. I'm sure we are going to start to get some hot seats, some rumors. Things are getting spicy in the NFL. It's that time of year. Cheers, everybody. Have a great week. I will see you next Tuesday. Signing off for the Locked On NFL podcast.